Welcome, friends, to the Shambhala Mountain Center online Q&A. I'm Dan Hesse. I'm the resident Acharya at Shambhala Mountain Center, and I'm happy to have my close friend, Michael Gayner, the executive director. Michael, how are you this evening?
I'm delighted to be here, and I'm basically good, and I'm fighting a cold, and it's been a heck of a year. And I think, like many of the leaders at SMC and probably many of the leaders in Shambhala, we're all a little bit flabbergasted or just a little bit tuckered out. And so that's one of the things at SMC that I'm trying to encourage is, you know, there's a lot of us who've really worked hard this year to get to where we are now, and we'll talk about that tonight, and that we find some ways to take care of ourselves. And in so doing, recognize that we're really fulfilling our work, our mission on the land. So in a nutshell, I'm good. Thanks, Dan. How are you?
I'm well and similar. It's been quite a ride, and it's been a good ride. By the way, just as a footnote to everyone who's listening, that please ask questions in the comment section as we're talking and as we're going through the material that we've already received from folks, and we'll be able to actually address those comments as you type them in. So I'll remind you a couple of times as we go through. Shambhala Mountain Center has been working hard to stay tuned in with the larger community. We've worked hard to stay tuned in with our own community and also with everyone who regards SMC as their home or as a resource. And we've had a lot of forms of dialogue with our constituencies and people who visit us and donors. And we want to be in dialogue with all of you because that's the only way we can know how to serve you, what your interests are and what's important to you, and being able to let you know what's going on with us. So this is one of our tools for dialogue. Michael and I and Ryan Stagg and Mac McGoldrick drove down from Shambhala Mountain Center. You may notice that we're in a different kind of a space. We're in Fort Collins at something called the Powerhouse, which is basically a think tank for environmental building and energy conservation, and we have access to these wonderful spaces and fast internet, which is not something we have at Shambhala Mountain Center. So I'll be bringing questions to Michael, and a lot of those questions come from surveys we've taken from our constituency and from donors, and we've condensed them into various themes. And again, we're taking live questions as well. Just type them into your group chat and we'll take it from there. So actually, even though we've been through quite a year, a lot of exciting things have been going on at Shambhala Mountain Center. And Michael, would you say a little bit about some of the things that are coming to completion these days, especially maybe start with our big wastewater collection system?
Right. Well, the pipes, they've been calling to us for 10 years.
The pipes, they're calling?
Yes, they called and they're now in the ground. What we're doing now is landscaping the earth. You know, we've got about 7.5, a little shy of 7.5 acres of disturbed land. So we're grooming it, contouring it, you know, staking out paths, and we'll be seeding all of that disturbed earth, and then really making sure that we have a fresh start in some of those areas, so that if we have the wet winter that we are projecting this year, we'll get actually good grow back next year of the kind of plants that we want. So yeah, the pipe, to have that done, and it's huge. You know, it was a $1.2 million project, and certainly this summer when, you know, we had all the allegations with the Sakyong, and we started losing some programs, and you know, a number of financial crises started stacking up. We were quite short on the amount of money we'd need for it, and then a number of factors that we'll talk about this evening came together, and we were able to take a bit of a leap and get the pipe in the ground. So that's huge. So that's a big one. Another one that's really
quite an epical thing. You know, I first started working on the water rights back in 1977, and we've been working constantly putting things under the ground for 40 years, and now we have completed the backbone of our infrastructure. And you know, it's really a big deal that we are now, you know, it's sort of like we've got our skeletal system ready to go for SMC. So I, in particular, having been watching it for all these years, am jumping for joy today. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, Tsugna Rinchen is, we did all the pujas, we connected with the Dralas and the Nagas of the land, and now we have the Lu taken care of from one end of the land to the other, so we can, you know, celebrate that richness, manifesting that quality of Yun, and see what's next. So another big project that is nearing this phase of completion for this year is forestry, and you know, plugs into a lot of different things. I think anyone who's aware of the megafires and even the birth of the word megafire out in California and elsewhere, but in particular in California these days, those tragic fires there, the suppression of 150 years of naturally occurring fires has led to overburdened forests, with a loss of with a loss of biodiversity, where you get, you know, the overgrowth, for example, in our area of ponderosa pines, where biodiversity is in the flora and the fauna in the understory. So we've cut down quite a few trees, probably 40%, on about 125 acres of the land. And, you know, we've done it carefully, very, very carefully, and it's part of a large sort of scientifically driven movement that's happening in this part of the country, but also in other parts of the country. And it's just, you can feel, like before when I would walk in those woods, you'd feel a sense of, you know, just hard to breathe, the trees, if you're tuning in, and now there's this feeling of expansion. And you can see, it's really quite powerful.
Surprisingly natural, isn't it? It's quite startling to see the land opened up like this, and it just seems to breathe. And it's quite amazing to see these big machines just like snipping off the trees like broccoli.
Yeah, and you know, it's sad. Each tree that goes down, there's a feeling of like, you know, there's a friend that's going. And then the ecosystem of the forest, that bioentity itself, feels the relief. So, you know, you're balancing relief and joy with sadness, and that, you know, it's a good metaphor for life in many ways. So we'll be finished that project for this year in a few weeks. And then we'll have more slope work in years to come, harder to access trees that are more specialized work.
Yeah, it's quite efficient, actually. And Michael was concerned that the acharya wouldn't wake up in the morning, so we had them put the tree processing machines near my house, and that's been very effective. And it's all in all, it's been a great project.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad that it served its double purposes. And you know, the forestry work, it's part of a whole. You know, once we have the pipe in place, and now that it's there, then in 2019. You know, one of the things we're going to be able to do is really start to work on the master planning process. All of our resources won't be focused on getting that thing done while we're doing, you know, our regular kind of program work and development of community and such. So a part of that, a major component of the master planning process is good stewardship. And, you know, one of the things that I think we as Shambhalians bring to this is a sense of mutual stewardship, and in fact transcending that notion that has a slight sense of, you know, kind of a stage theory of development towards sentience or something. But, you know, we look after the land and the land looks after us, and there's a sense of, you know, beyond a dualistic fixation of the whole. And we want to tune into what that means. So we're bringing together an environmental auxiliary group to the governing council of Shambhala Mountain. I'm sorry?
I say Jim Tolstrup and some other wonderful Sangha people who know a lot about this.
We're in discussion with various people. I don't want to put Jim on the spot of, he hasn't completely said, so yes. So there are wonderful people coming on board. So for me, that's a very exciting thing that, we were driven to do this work by the state, and, I don't begrudge that. I think it was important aspect of being a good environmental citizen. And now we can do this other work and do it in a really thoughtful, careful manner, and that's important because we can think about the view at the same time as talk about the work. So it's really being able to understand the disciplines involved, do the kind of proper technical aspects of it, and infuse the whole thing with our Shambhala Dharma. And that for me is, such a powerful opportunity. We are the biggest Shambhala village, in a sense, SMC, and we combine living together and working together and practicing together with the land itself. And so to have this opportunity now to be able to be really thoughtful and to bring in conventional skills, that's just so juicy and exciting. I can even feel it through the fog of being slightly sick.
It's interesting that the deep work we're doing on the land, is sort of reflected in living together and going through everything we've been through in the community. That I feel like we've been doing that same kind of deep work with each other as a Shambhala community. What's it been like from your perspective, Michael?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to express of this year. Everybody obviously has had a journey this year. And as a community, it's at SMC, there's aspects of it that are just so poignant. When all the news broke this summer, we knew that, as the community of the land, we had to get together. And that first Sunday, like the next day, I believe it was, we gathered as a community and for 3 hours just sat and everybody listened to each other, one after the other, with, laser-like kindness, if you can bring those two together, just one after the other. It was 3 hours of listening and heartfelt talking and tears and, also just a real sense of like, yeah, this is who we are. We listen to each other. We care for each other. And I think it kind of set the ground for some really amazing, amazing is a little bit easy of a word, some very meaningful, some very challenging discussions that allowed our community to feel real and people to feel they were there for a reason and still connected with the purpose, and to feel more than just negative emotions, of being triggered or being angry or being hurt, but also feelings of inspiration and magnanimity, other of our virtues. And I think it's what culminated in our letter from the staff that I thought was, even though it was in a sense written by the whole community had input, it was a letter with cut and clarity and kindness, so that was, the community just continues to blow my mind. There have been times this year where folks were just tired, and we've been living in a construction zone for almost 3 months now, and it wears on you when you think you're supposed to be up in the mountains at 8,000 feet and you can hear the whir of an owl, and instead it's like some 30-foot long Dan's door chewing down trees starting in the morning. It's quite different. So, all of this to say, I think in some ways the community at SMC has really come together. And at the same time, I know we've been through a lot, and there's, a certain level of just kind of, we're tuckered. But it's a beautiful thing. I think it's really genuine. And I don't think anybody feels they've had a lid put on them. I think
that's the wonderful thing, is that there's a real diversity of how people feel and have experienced things. And there's been room for people to feel really differently about things.
Mhm.
And it hasn't seemed to have gotten in the way of our intimacy and our caring about each other.
Mhm.
And I really didn't know how that was going to go. And it's been very inspiring for me, certainly, to just feel like there's this genuine community that can feel so many different ways. It's a good thing.
Yeah, and then beyond that, we've put new roofs on 5 buildings, our 5 major buildings. We've bought, I don't know how many, was it 60 new tents, beautiful new tents. We figured out where the Kami Shrine is going to be rebuilt, and we're launching that project. There's just a lot of really exciting things that are happening at SMC. It feels very dynamic, and a little bit like, I just ate a big bowl of something. Yeah.
Tell me, Michael, that you're looking forward, given everything we've been through as a larger community, what are some of the programs that seem to be, people are telling us they have the most interest in going forward over this next year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think, there's 2 categories that are most significant. One of them is Scorpion Seal, SSA, Werma practitioners, and there's a strong desire to be doing that practice and those trainings. And we'll be holding a Garchen. We're not sure if it's 3 or 4 levels yet, and there'll be other programs that support Werma activity. The other biggest from our surveys, the other biggest desire is shamatha. And, we have our Doctrine in the winter that you're leading.
Yes, the Simplicity Doctrine.
Yes. And could you maybe just say something about that?
Well, I'm really excited about it. It's starting in about a month, and Janet Salintris is going to be co-leading the first half of it with me. And I just felt that coming back to our roots, our shamatha roots, would be really healthy, and I just felt passionate about it. And so we're calling it a Simplicity Doctrine, which doesn't mean we won't, it won't be completely austere, but it is going to be back to our roots, Oryoki and shamatha practice principally. So I think it's going to be moderate sized, so it'll be really intimate, and I'm quite enthusiastic about it. Coming soon.
So we'll have another Doctrine next summer. And then we're doing a thing we call seminary, which hopefully doesn't feel appropriative, but simply reminiscent. And it'll be 1 month focused on, and I think, Dan, again, you'll be involved with Lodinima, who is our new Shastri, and Susan Chapman, and maybe a few others acharyas. I don't want to, again, put anyone on the spot. So, there are a few other folks that we're talking with.
This is a deep dive into our fundamental teachings. So we're hoping to have a series of these year after year. And this first year, we're going to be going deeply into the foundation teachings of Hinayana, lots of shamatha, and those basic teachings. But the idea of really laying a foundation for folks. Some folks have felt like, well, there hasn't been space for people to really get their foundation in basic Buddhist teachings. So over a month like this, it's going to be very disciplined and in-depth, and people coming out of it can have confidence that they've really been exposed to and explored fundamental Hinayana and other teachings from the Mahayana and Shambhala point of view. So it's all in that container, but we're going after that basic stuff. And there's a lot of enthusiasm for that. People are quite excited about it.
So those are the 2 areas that we received feedback about. And then we're also going to be looking at other kinds of programming. Some of it's going to be a little more experimental because we just haven't done it that much before, but programs around inclusivity, diversity training, that kind of thing. Still very much, we're committed to it. I think we'll talk about it a little later here. That's an area that we're very interested in. And then we have the usual full slate. One of the big challenges with this year was we had basically 3 months where we were only able to do programming on weekends, a few contractual obligations during the week. But other than that, during all the work, all the digging and crunching and chopping and, blasting and everything, we lost $250,000, you know, and opportunity cost money of not holding programs. So next year we're not going to have that, and so it's a bigger tableau that we've got to work on. So,
Mike, tell me what about the Vajrayana Transmission and follow-up programs like that? Do you have any information or a view on how all that might work?
Yeah, well, a lot of that is quite literally above my pay grade. The Sakyong will need to, you know, manifest and make decisions about how he will move forward, and so there's a lot of things that need to happen still in terms of Shambhala transmissions at the Sakyong level, and you know, I'm waiting for my teacher to decide how he wants to proceed.
Yep. And so we're collaborating with other land centers in terms of providing support for practitioners going forward?
Yes. So every year, all of the land centers work together, and we work with Shambhala International, Charlie Getzel, and Maggie Colby and those folks, and allocate all of the various programs. So we know we'll get some. I don't know if there will be, for example, Sacred World Assembly. I don't think there will be one next year, or Rigdanabhisheka. I don't think either of those will happen, to my knowledge. But again, it's not really my decision to make. We will be supporting the Vajrayana Path programs, as discussed earlier. And we also have other Vajrayana and other Buddhist teachers who come to SMC, not often to actually give full empowerments, but sometimes that happens in the teachings.
Yeah, so we'll be continuing hosting teachers, other teachers, as we have over these last few years.
In that sense, it's business as usual. There are no policy changes at SMC or in the Sangha that I'm aware of in regard to, you know, teachers from other lineages coming. So SMC will be hosting, will continue to host teachers from other lineages.
So if you were to look back on the year at the year and look at the challenges we've faced, you know, I know we've had some staff cuts, and as you mentioned, we had to cut back on some of our programming for the pipe construction and community life. But what's it been like? What's the texture of it been like?
You know, SMC, the Sakyong has talked about it, and you know, just about everybody who's ever lived at SMC has talked about how it's like dog years. You know, SMC years, you get 7 years in one, and it's been a multifaceted year. And you know, with the practices we do, you know, there's a little less tendency to get fixated, and you can still find the joy in the moments, you know, and the joy of exertion. So it's hard to encapsulate it in a sense. You know, there were beautiful moments. You know, our donors, our major donors, and our, you know, donors at every level. There were so many beautiful moments where people would say, "We're supporting you. You know, we appreciate SMC. We love the land. It is such a meaningful place. I like what you're doing." You know, just all kinds of ways that people have expressed support and love, and they really came through. You know, our comprehensive campaign, we just crossed the $2 million mark, you know, so we've got another 270 left to go in our campaign before the end of the year, and we need to hit those marks. But, you know, it's just been so successful and so much support. So that quality of love that we received, and frankly, you know, of respect and appreciation for the work we've done, you know, you could almost hear this collective sigh of relief from the community when we said, we're going to do the pipe. And, you know, with a little soupçon of disbelief. It was, you know, you get this kind of bug-eyed thing from people, a little bit of like, really? Oh, that's good. You know, it wasn't easy. There were times in the summer, you know, at one point, we were looking at over $1 million deficit that would hit home in October, November. And that's a big obstacle, you know, and so it took a lot of work for us to get to a place where we could take that leap. And when we had to take the leap, not everything was in place. So, you know, there was a certain amount of trust in the draw laws. There was also trust in the good work that people were doing. And there were enough messages coming in from donors and, you know, from programs that even though we were losing some registrations and we were losing some of our significant programs, the picture was good enough that we could take that leap and proceed. So, you know, a part of it is all of that hard work. And, you know, then there's things like we had to do staff cuts. You know, we had to be extremely prudent. We knew we were taking care of people's money and needing to show that, not even show so much as just do, you know, the responsible and sometimes very, very difficult and painful things. And that was a very hard period in the summer when we had to interview basically everybody on the land and made some hard decisions.
I remember I felt really inspired by the support we were getting, and when we interviewed each person individually this fall, it was sort of like the bigger picture of SMC coming together with the interpersonal connection, and I just felt really like we were doing something real. I mean, it's like real people, and we're stewards of this larger situation, and, you know, that's joining heaven and earth. That was pretty personal. It was really personal.
Yep. Yeah, very much so.
So this year coming up, is it going to be as challenging as this past year? Of course, you do have your crystal ball with you, don't you, Michael? So you know exactly how it's going to be?
It's invisible, but it's on the end of my little wrist.
What does it look like for next year in terms of our challenges?
Yeah, so, you know, one of the ways that we worked with the impending deficit was, you know, that we have a payment plan. So we'll be paying off parts of the pipe next year. We have about $650,000 in a managed account. We'll have about $300,000 in the bank at the end of the year if we meet our targets. So part of this is we still have some ambitious goals for the end of the year for our end of year campaign, and we do have to meet those goals. And you know, we're very optimistic about that based on how the year has gone. But assuming that we get into 2019, and there's still a bit of, you know, paying off the karma, so to speak, or addressing the karma of the pipe. But right now, I'd say we're probably a little less than $250,000 short for the year, all things together. And so that could be like, oh my God, you know. But in the context of every year since I've been here, and I've been here for 8 years, it's a much better picture than I've ever gone into, or, you know, certainly up there in the top percentage. So it's, you know, we have an amazing team at SMC, and they've just really stepped up in so many ways, so many times. So next year, it's going to be challenging, and we do have to continue to succeed and be innovative, find new ways to connect with our mission and to manifest it. We're taking some leaps, but so all in all, it'll be challenging, but I think very powerful and interesting as well in how we understand who we are, given that we are a Shambhala Land Center. You know, that's not a question, but what does that mean? That's a question that we're going to be exploring vigorously. And then in 2020, you know, we'll have done a lot of the strategic work in 2019 as well. So very interesting opportunities to be looking deeply at who we are and seeing how that applies to capital projects such as, you know, building Staff Village and redoing the dining and downtown area, you know, those kind of things. So a very powerful year for wrapping up the final pieces of some of these state-driven things, such as the pipe, of seeing how the forest flourishes, of how we deepen our understanding of who we are and how we live, where we are, and then preparing for 2020, which is really, you know, barring some unforeseen circumstance, 2020 can really be a year where we say, this is, you know, this is how we roll. And then by the end of 2020, my aspiration is to have a clear and articulated and shared master plan for SMC, and to then be able to launch with prudent financial triggers, the various campaigns to build and to complete that vision.
You know, one thing that I'd like to just reinforce that you said is that for whatever reason, we're attracting amazing people on staff these days. I mean, just really creative, younger and older people with a lot of skills and a lot of enthusiasm and a real willingness to work as a team. It's one of the more exciting groups of people that I've worked with in a long, long time. And I'm not sure exactly what the magic word is that's bringing these folks to us, but it is kind of thrilling and inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's impossible to express without taking a lot of time. The staff at SMCR. You know, we have people on every range, you know, the full range of you know, one of the most vital and pressing questions in our community around the Sakyong, people who are like, he's my teacher and I'm completely devoted and more so now than ever, and others who are completely on the opposite end. And we can cohabitate and also communicate about this. And that's amazing. You know?
Amazing.
It's a very powerful indicator of the caliber of the community. You know, as I said before, there's some folks who have just put a lot of hard work into a really hard year and they're a little tired, but underneath that, you know, there's just a sense of, we have an amazing group who've really plugged into what SMC is. You know, I think this summer, where 3 weeks after everything erupted and we hosted the Garchen, the staff were still, you know, really struggling with things. And yet the feedback we got from the Garchen, you know, who were basically some of our most senior practitioners who had needed to come home, you know, SMC is their spiritual home, and be held. And the staff did that, you know. And some of these are people who, you know, walked in the door 2 days prior. There's just some magic in that collective group. So I can't express enough of how much I appreciate the staff at SMC. So
I'm going to now change channels a little bit. We're going to start answering some questions submitted previously, and I'd like to re-invite folks to ask questions in the comment section on your screen live, and we'll try to address those as well. I have one so far, and but I'd like to start just talking a little bit about the Stupa and the MBE Grounds, Michael. And with all the turmoil going on, are they, someone asked, are they at risk of being seized due to foreclosure or inability to make a loan payment or anything like that? In other words, how are the encampment and the stupa related to SMC legally, so to speak?
Right. So if you drew a line, if you picture SMC in your mind, and about halfway down that sort of triangle that steps up on one side and is a straight line on the other, about a little more than a third of the way up from the south, and just draw a line across it at the foot of Marpa Point. Everything south of that point, so it includes Marpa Point, the Stupa, the MBE Grounds, that is all land that's owned by Shambhala USA.
Not by SMC.
Not by SMC. SMC owns the land north of that and the buildings. There is no lien on the land to the south of SMC. We have a management contract with Shambhala USA, so we're responsible for the upkeep of the stupa and, you know, for all the utility bills and Joshua's salary and all of that kind of thing. The MBE grounds are certainly spiritually completely owned by the Kasam. It is their land. SMC doesn't do anything there without ever, you know, getting permission to do so. So there's no danger to the stupa or to MBE grounds. You know, and I think underneath that question, there's the implicit question of, is SMC at risk? And, you know, on some level, any entity, any incorporated entity is at risk. SMC has certainly, you know, for a long time been an undercapitalized entity, and has faced enormous financial challenges. And every year I've been in charge, it's been really challenging. We've had to find ways to survive. I think that we're still, like a really major crisis. I can't think of one off the cuff, but I can understand how things might not work out. But I've been through this cycle enough times to say with some confidence that SMC has a very bright future. And it's in good hands now, with the team that we have running it. And I think it's pretty stable. So I don't think any of those entities, be it Stupa, MPE, or SMC itself, are in danger. It's more that we've got a lot of work to do.
Michael, let's stay up in the Southlands there. Two questions. If someone wants to make a donation to the Stupa, how do they go about? And second, what's the deal with moving the Kami Shrine? What's the backstory on that? We talked about that a little bit, and we're looking forward to that as a project. So just lay a little ground for why the Kami Shrine would move.
Right. So two separate questions. So in terms of Stupa, it's very straightforward. If you want to contribute to the Stupa, and it's just a sense of generally connecting energetically and wanting to support the upkeep of it, the utilities, Joshua's salary, the cost of all the various things, just indicate that, and the money will go towards that. SMC spends a fair chunk of money on that every year, and the money will go towards that. If you want to support specific artistic completion, and the Stupa has many, many elements of it that still need to be complete. If you want your money to go towards that, indicate that, and the money will be separated and pay for that. So two very separate roles. Both money goes to SMC. One, the money will all be going to the artistic projects, the other to general upkeep. In terms of the Kami Shrine, our Kami Shrine is to Amaterasu Okami. She is housed there. And it's within the lineage of the Issei Shrine. And at Issei, every 20 years, they have these two designated spots, and they go back and forth. One is dismantled, it's built on the other site, and then it goes back and forth every 20 years. And it's done that for, I don't know how many millennia at this point. Probably more than that too, I forget. So our Kami Shrine needs to do the same thing, and we're behind. And one of the issues was there was no other site. So that's been quite a process. I'm delighted to say we now have another site. And it's, if you picture standing in front of the Stupa, looking directly at it, it'll be on the left, upslope. And there's a fabulous protector warrior rock up there. And we'll build the path up. So if you imagine the rock wall that leads along the edge of the Stupa after the final Kami Shrine, not the Stupa, the Kami Shrine, after the final Tori gate, we'll build a path up above that rock wall, and then the Stupa up there. So it'll be a little bit expensive. We'll probably do very careful fundraising for that. I hope to have that done next year, but it might take a little longer than that. But we now have green light on the spot. We know how we're going to do it, so it's really a major step forward.
There was another question, Michael, that I can just answer very simply is, do we have dates for the seminary program that we described? And the answer is yes, June 7th to July 7th. And we're in the process of designing that. There'll be a lot more information available to that as we go further with the design process overall. And I think we can also talk a little bit about, interesting question, a legacy question is, what are we doing to protect the history, the many teachings given by great teachers who have been at SMC over now, what, 45 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for it. We have a really good AVIT person right now, Tony. He's going to be a part of one of our cost-saving measures. We were very clear and specific in how we recognized we needed to cut some costs. So he's actually going to be away for a few months. during the winter where there isn't a really high AV need. But a part of his portfolio will be working with and organizing the collection of recordings that we have. And there have been some other folks who've taken some bites at it, but there hasn't been a really systematic going over of all of our recordings. So that's a project for 2019. So as we go further with that, we'll have a better capacity to answer it in a way that is, for example, here's our catalog. Do you want to order these teachings? And some of it will be coordinating. When we've looked into this in the past, there are teachers that we need to work with. There's a lot of details that need to be taken care of in order to assure the copyrights are properly respected and such. So it's a big project. We have the recordings, and we're going to be working on it.
Michael, when you were talking about the southern part of the land with the stupa and the Kami Shrine and the Kasung land, you said it was owned by Shambhala USA. What is Shambhala USA? Who are the owners of Shambhala USA?
Shambhala USA is the non-profit manifestation of Shambhala in the USA. So it is an incorporated non-profit entity in the US. So things such as Karma Choling would be a division or a section or a portion of Shambhala USA. SMC is separate from Shambhala USA. It's a separately incorporated educational nonprofit, whereas Shambhala USA is a religious nonprofit.
So there's been a number of questions, Michael, that we've received in the past and today, wondering how we're working after the allegations arose regarding Sakyong Mipam Rinpoche. How are we working with that in our community, for instance? How are we relating to photos on the shrines? And how are we communicating with the Sakyong these days? And that's probably an important thing to just explore a little bit in terms of giving a flavor of how the community is working with everything.
Mm-hmm. So I think the shrine photos, there's a great example. So it's different in different situations. We have rental clients and such where they indicate to us based on their rental contract what kind of a shrine they want. And so in those cases, it's very, very rare that they would want a Shambhala shrine anyways. Then we have Shambhala programs, and that's up to the teacher, and different teachers have requested different kinds of shrines, some with lineage pictures, some without. In our staff practice space in Pushpa, that was the decision of the staff who actually make use of that space. And they specifically wanted to keep the lineage pictures up, and so they are up. In sacred studies, we have the lineage pictures up, and there's a kata over the Sakyong's photograph, indicating a sense of, reflecting his statement that he is going to step back from administration and teaching and wait for the investigation to be complete and then be able to make a statement. So the kata, the kata is there to reflect that reality, and the reality that, amongst our staff, there's a whole range of different relationships with him. So, we're not avoiding the question. The picture is there. And we're not denying the connection of the Sakyong with SMC, and as the root teacher of many of our community members. So there's a way to answer the lineage pictures. At the same time, there was a community member who is now at the Abbey, actually, and Missa. She, at a community meeting, asked about, can there be ways that, rather than in a sense taking away, that we add? And so the addition was more about feminine. So there's a buckwheat.
Torma.
Thank you. A torma. Dan and I remind each other words that we can't remember. There's a torma. Is there that is representing feminine, the feminine.
On the shrine.
On the shrine, thank you. We have introduced or included Ekajati in the evening chants, and
Actually, so go.
in the morning chants. Is there something else?
No, that's pretty good.
That's good. So there's elements like that, and Noel Smith, our Director of Practice Education Community Culture, is leading a course on
Yashe Sogyo.
Jitsogya. So, you know, there's ways in which we're doing that. We have a feminine wisdom representative on the community council, and our previous one left, so we elected another one, or the women of the land did. The women are, actually, I'm starting to segue into more community stuff. So I think that answers the question sufficiently, but if there's more, please do ask.
I think one thing I felt is it's been a very interactive community process. We didn't have the right answers. In other words, there wasn't one right answer that was a policy. That it's been an interactive exploration of how do we go ahead together. And it's felt sad and creative. You know, in other words, real relationship and real openness. It hasn't been a top-down process, and yet there's been real hierarchy as well. I felt really, really happy about, you know, how we went about that. There was a question asked about curriculum, about when do we offer Sacred Path, and that's an interesting situation. There's an awful lot of curriculum to offer, in terms of Sacred Path at SMC, for staff people, we did offer a course last year, and I look forward to finding time to do it this year. But we have a lot of diversity on the land, so we work hard to get curriculum available that brings people's paths forward as they are inspired. In terms of offering it as a public program, I don't think we've done that in a while, Michael. Is that correct?
No, I think that there are programs that are open, core Shambhala programs that include that. I'm just not 100% certain. I know we're doing a level 2 this weekend.
With Galen Charya Ferguson.
That's right. Yeah. So, you know, as far as I know, there are Shambhala programs throughout the levels that are offered to both the public and the staff. You know, there's a lot of learning and teaching opportunities at SMC for staff.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the heart of the question, that you know, one of the ways we use this time of dropped revenues and no programs during the week was to have a staff enrichment program and have classes, and you know, some of it was just fantastic meat and potatoes dharma, you know, 4 foundations of mindfulness, you know, the 12 nidanas, these kind of just really good things to go into, and a range of seasoned to new practitioners coming to take part in those classes, and those were during the work days in the mornings on Tuesday and Wednesday. So there's an enormous number of ways to engage one's mind and one's practice and study at SMC.
Yeah. There's one sort of a footnote question I just want to take care of. Did you sell water rates to raise money? And the answer is no, we didn't. We did investigate. We've looked into how much they're worth and whether they're marketable, but there wasn't a need. And I think the governing council also felt like, you know, they'll be more valuable in the future than selling them now would be. So we have done some investigation. We've done a lot of work this year to update our water rights and make sure they're protected. And, you know, we've gone through a bunch of stuff that we have to go through every 6 years. So everything's sort of neatened up and in good shape. But no, we haven't sold any of those. And finally, go ahead, Michael.
Just to add, you know, in the 80s, Dan Hesse, when Dan was the ED, he had the foresight to buy a swath of water rights that really fundamentally allows us to exist right now. If it wasn't for Dan's foresight back in the 80s, we would not exist. We would have run out of water and stayed run out of water and closed down. So just huge kudos to you. I don't know how you did it, but you did it. And so now we are in the fortunate position of having some water rights that we actually don't need and cannot conceivably use. You know, if you run the math, it's multiples more water than we would ever need at our largest conceivable build out, given our geographic location and such. And so with those, one of the goals of the institution at this point of SMC and the leadership of SMC is to pay off the final individual debts. So there's just the one debt to the bank, and we're continuing to chip away at that. And rather than incurring more debt, to actually have some legacy funds available. And so one piece would be those water rights, that they could be trigger money for the next major capital campaign, for example, because water rights will increase on the Front Range due to the horrors of global warming, unfortunately, but also the increase of the population on the Front Range. They will most likely go up significantly in value. So if possible, we want to hold on to those and have that as a legacy for when we actually begin our next capital project.
One thing I'd like to invite Michael to talk about, coming back to the community side again, is I know there's been a tremendous amount of work with Megan and Lori on our policies and procedures in terms of protection and making sure people are safe when they come to SMC, and having a lot more clarity about a lot of the issues that have created a lot of suffering in the past. Michael, would you share a little more about that project?
Yeah. So two of our directors, Lori Amadeo and Megan Weinkoff of marketing and strategic program development in particular, have just submitted a raft of documents, and a bunch of us have read through them. And they're a collation of documents around inclusivity, protection, non-discrimination, ACA stuff. So there's a fair number of different areas that all take care of this core thing of how do we protect our staff, how do we protect our guests, our presenters, and how do we do that in a way that is really clear, that combines the right legal wording, that allows people the opportunity to explore the view of some of the kind of modern inclusivity work, and bring it together with Shambhala. And then how do we disseminate this information and make sure that there are policies that ensure that if an incident occurs, everybody knows this is what you then do in order to bring support in to bear so that we can address the situation. That's a lot of work. There's a ton of different elements there, not the least of which is taking the time to actually think through the view of these things, and how it marries with the Dharma. That's a great big topic. And we are proceeding, at a pace. In fact, I believe on Saturday, our director of HR, Chris Gibbs, Dan, and myself are going to be getting together and reviewing about 30 pages of documents to take it to the next step. I believe we have made a commitment to have this launchable by Shambhala Day, or I think we might have been a little more vague. Hopefully we were, because it's a lot of work. But we are proceeding with this, and it is recognized that it's a really important aspect of meeting this moment, the Me Too moment, but also the moment where people are, it's harder to deny that we live in a, deeply fractured, racistly habituated society, amongst all the other isms and, all of what is talked about in intersectionality or looked at there. So how we meet this moment is really important. We recognize that importance, and we're committed to seeing this process through and sharing, both aspects of the journey, but also the results of that through the policies and procedures that we implement at SMC.
So we've covered a lot of ground, and there is another question. Some of us are growing older. Not you, Michael. Your vivacity seems to be making you younger as time goes on. But Doris asked a question that I'm interested in as well. As we become elderly, is there a possibility there could be a space or housing or some situation for those of us who would like to spend our older years at Shambhala Mountain Center?
Yeah, that's a question that's really dear to my heart, actually. It ties in very closely with this notion of what is a Shambhala Land Center. What does it mean? And over the generations of defining this, of exploring and learning into that question, what role will Shambhala Mountain Center have in that? And how does that play into the immediacy of the next 2 years in putting together our strategic plan? My desire, my aspiration is that there be an integrated community for retired folks who are part of our community, that SMC, so that we can have a multi-generational society there. It's going to be difficult. We don't have money to throw around. So how the first volley happens could be through, financial instruments such as having people invest in their homes, and they can live there for a certain period of time, until they can't live there anymore. And then at that point, SMC owns it. So there might be investment opportunities. There could be granting opportunities. There will definitely be fundraising and development opportunities. But this is a question that we're baking into the master plan for SMC, and that when we build the Stab Village, a part of the design of that is, what is a Shambhala village look like, and how do folks who are older fit in there and allow themselves to not just be taken care of, but be vibrant members of the community, sharing a life of experience with younger people, being mentors, being friends, being kind enough to let themselves be taken care of, all of these things. So having the vision of that clear, having the careful thinking through of how the financial aspects work, and then, of course, there will be stages towards this. We can't do it all like that, but how we plan that out and allow, certain plots of land to be built, and at a certain age, people require certain levels of medical attention. So these kind of things all need to be thought through, but it is very much a piece of what we're thinking about, and for me personally inspiring as well, because I think I would like to retire at SMC someday.
So I'd like to invite our listeners again we're coming to the end of our programmed part of questions, and I'd like to invite you to type in questions in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'd like to embarrass Mr. Gayner a little bit, which is something I really enjoy doing, which is just by saying how deeply I have appreciated his kind, wise, and unbelievably strong leadership in these difficult times. It's really been something to see and be part of. And one of the things that I appreciate most is his ability to genuinely empower others, so that we have a real team as opposed to one strong guy and everyone following. But we have a really dynamic team at SMC. So did it work? Did it embarrass you? I did my best.
I'm blushing.
Okay, good. That's great. It's really been, it's really a wonderful team we have, and we'd like you all to be part of our team in the sense of being supporters, both financially, obviously, and in terms of your input, which means a lot to us. So thank you very much. And Michael, would you like to close with a few words?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Dan. It's, you're a mentor and a friend, a Vajra brother, and it's been a delight. And I look forward to many more years. Many more years we're not sure of yet, but, at least a few more. Yes, thank you to everyone who tuned in. This has been an amazing year, and our survival is a direct reflection, and our thriving, it's not just surviving, but it's thriving, has been a direct reflection of the kindness and generosity of our community. I knew that when I took over, the narrative around SMC, the storyline had to change. And that it would happen not so much by talking about it, but by doing things. And those kind of things are, learning how in the, rough and tumble of life to return kindness to confusion, or, anger, to actually get things done, so that you can reappropriate. So Shambhala time doesn't mean being late. Shambhala time means being on time. and it's like, well, that's just SMC, another one of those things, like we'll never get the pipe in the ground. We got the pipe in the ground, now let's make Shambhala time, we're on time. The narrative, the story of SMC, I think, is for me a story of incredible commitment by a huge number of people, including the folks listening to this broadcast. And I'm honored, I'm inspired to continue to play a part in this. So thank you all.
Thank you all, and good evening. Have a wonderful evening. And it's really been a pleasure to share all of this with you. And please come visit us soon. Be in touch. Thanks so much.